Last but not least, we need to know how we can edit files, because there usually you will have to edit some configuration files for a network or for the web server or for other parts of the lab. Until now we learned how we can create files, move them around, but not how we can edit them. As we mostly worked with the terminal, because graphical user interfaces or graphical applications are a bit hard to get work with a core network emulator, we recommend you to use terminal-based tools for editing. So for example, we can use the editor Nano, which is a terminal text editor, to edit text files. And that works rather simple. We can just type nano and then give the name of the file that we want to edit. So for example, textfile.txt, and then press enter. And now we are already in the text editor in Nano. And here we can just write our text. We can say, okay, hello world, I love the iLabX. And now we can also move the arrow keys to move around, and if we want to save that, we can see the instructions here at the bottom, so you won't need most of these. You can have a look at some Nano tutorials if you are not familiar with it. Mostly you will need write out to save it and exit to close the editor, and that basically means you press Ctrl O for write out or save. Just try that, Ctrl O, and then you see, okay, it would be written to that text file, and we can just press enter. And now we see, okay, it wrote 2 lines, which we wrote here, and we can press Ctrl X at the bottom left, as we can see, to exit the editor. And now, as you can see, we created the text file.txt here, and we can use cut to see what the content of that file is, which is exactly what we just wrote. And we can also use Nano again to edit that file. So important here, as you might see, you don't see that I use the arrow keys, but you can use the arrow keys to go through your last commands that you typed in. Just arrow down, go through latest, arrow up goes to the latest history of your terminal commands, and arrow down goes back again. And if we just press enter here and edit the text file again with Nano, we can see, okay, it's the same text file that we just created, and we can add some more text and press Ctrl O to save it again, press enter, and Ctrl X to exit. And again, if you check the text file, we see that we saved the new text. Now, if you're already familiar with the terminal, you probably also are familiar with some terminal-based text editors. So in case you prefer to use, for example, Vim or Emacs over Nano, then you can totally do that. So it's just our recommendation to use Nano. So, for example, Vim is also pre-installed, and you can just use Vim to edit the text file and save it again. So that's up to you, but if you're new to it, we recommend to use Nano. Now, if you really want to use a graphical text editor, we also added a way to do that, but it doesn't work for each setup for now. So for example, for part 1 or week 1, and also maybe parts of part 2, it doesn't work out of the box, because in order to work you need already configured IP addresses for the different computers, and we only learn that in part 2 of the course, so we don't have them all readily set up in the beginning. But I can show it to you if we just open. So as you noticed, when I stopped the setup here, then also the terminal connected to -A was closed. And if I start, for example, part 2 and start the session, I can again click on a host and get a terminal that is connected to that host and use nano here to edit stuff, but I can also open a terminal in the VLab, so not in core, but connected to the virtual iLab. And there I can use the command ssh -x, then type in the host name that I want to connect to, for example here host 4, and then mousepad is the graphical editor that is pre-installed for you. And if we do that, then we are asked for a password, which is, as mentioned, always iLab. So I just entered that, it's just the same as here. And now I get a text editor here and can also, for example, write some text, hello world, and then press save. And then I'm asked, okay, yeah, where do I want to save it? And let's say I want to save it in my home directory, the iLab here, and give it the name new file.txt. And can close it again and also open a terminal on host 4, for example, and look at it if it is there, the file in /home/iLab, because I opened it as user iLab and not as user root, and can see, okay, here is the new file that we just created. Now here you might get stuck with the terminal. You can always press Control plus C to cancel an application that's currently running in a terminal, so that will be helpful oftentimes. If we try the same here, for example for host 1, then it won't work, so we'll just get an error message or we'll get stuck here, because this is a case I explained earlier. For these hosts here we didn't configure IP addresses yet, because this is a task of you in week 2 to do that. So therefore the graphical network, graphical text editor will not always work. But in later setups it should do. But we recommend you to just use Nano, which is really easy to use and more convenient than fiddling around with the graphical text editor.